I want to actually focus on a period of one single year from 2013 to 2014.
Yeah.
There were 10 accidents, beginning with an explosion on INS Sindhurakshak, the submarine that killed 18 sailors. There was a small fire on board INS Virat. There was a fire on board INS Konkan. There was a scraping incident involving INS Tarkash. There was a collision of INS Talwar with the fishing boat that did not have its lights on. There was a crack on the sonar dome of INS Betwa. There was the INS Sindhu Ghosh, the lead class of the submarine that sunk earlier, is kind of hitting something on while it was trying to secure alongside a berth. There was some water ingress on some part of a ship called INS Vipul. There was a damage to a port propeller of INS Arawat.
Yeah.
And finally, there was the incident of a fire or in a compartment of INS Sindhuratna, also a submarine, also of Sindhu Ghosh class. This incident led to the resignation of then Navy Chief Admiral D.K. Joshi. One of the rare instances, if I'm not wrong, of a service chief resigning. You would think why, but if you see 10 accidents in a span of 7-8 months, moral responsibility, etc., that's why he resigned. We'll get into accidents, we'll get into the possible reasons, and we'll get into whether or not the situation is alarming in the first place. But that 1 year, if you must have been a reporter back then, can you tell us what happened? Because this is a long list of incidents to happen within a span of 7-8 months.
So I have a bit of a bit of a complicated take on that period, because I was someone who was reporting on those incidents as well, and forgive me for being brutally honest, but many of the accidents that you've just read out, Dev, those are routine accidents. Now, look, when I started my first answer, I told you about the fire triangle on a ship, which is basically that a warship at sea, it's basically begging to catch fire. Okay, it's got inflammable paint, it's got fuel, it's got weapons, it's got no shortage of oxygen, it's got hot chambers, and it's got fuel. So a fire breaking out on a ship by itself is not a big deal. It's a big deal if that fire destroys the ship, or if that fire sinks the ship. Now, in many of the cases that you've just listed, those were fires which were brought under control. In some cases, there was a tragic loss of 1 or 2 lives, unacceptable, no doubt about it. But the ship was saved. The ships in most of those cases were saved. Now, at that particular time, I think there were more forces at play than just a focus on naval accidents. I think there were some wheels within wheels, politically speaking, in terms of what was happening with the naval leadership. I think there may have been some strings being pulled against the Navy chief of that time. And boy, am I going to get it on social media for saying this out loud, because this is something that most people only say in whispers and they don't like saying it out loud. But I think there was a bit of a campaign there.
Right.
But having said that, none of these incidents were small. They were all real incidents. And there were many credible reporters, Manupa B, Rahul Singh, many others who reported diligently on many of these accidents, and they brought a spotlight on what seemed to the country to be a kind of culture of carelessness, of a culture of ineptitude or incompetence leading to these accidents. And their reports were bang on, because after all, these are war-fighting assets. It's peacetime. These are hugely expensive, taxpayer-funded pieces of military hardware. How is it that every single week there's a fire here, there's a collision there, someone's falling off a ship here? I mean, what's going on? Isn't this like a trained service? So I think the Navy got caught in a kind of whirl of national and media attention, where every small thing was amplified in a big way. It's a bit like it's very much like crime reporting in our country. If we see a gang rape happening somewhere, suddenly gang rapes will start getting reported from all over the country and be given even bigger media focus than they usually would.
Yes.
Take the example of this IAS lady, Pooja Khedkar, right now. Because of her, the UPSC has become a spotlight. I mean, do we even care about the UPSC on a daily news wheel? You run a desk as well. Nobody really cares that much about the UPSC. But now because of her, it's become an emotive issue. So I think that became part of it, and many of those accidents got amplified in a bigger way than they normally would have. I'm not saying they were wrongly amplified. They were absolutely rightly amplified. But the point is, there was really a problem with the Navy. Okay. There was genuinely a problem with the Navy. And the Navy being the Navy, the buck stops with the chief. And he resigned, and whatever his reasons were, he took the moral responsibility for what was being increasingly perceived as, a Navy not able to pull its flock together and, get a fix on these accidents and these things. And that's what happened. Obviously, Admiral D.K. Joshi landed on his feet, became the Lieutenant Governor of and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which I think he still is.
Yes.
So he's his tale is not over, as they say. But the Sindhurakshak accident that happened, and I'll never forget that night because I was in the office when that happened, and I remember our Bombay bureau calling us up and giving us the story. That was a catastrophic accident. 18 sailors died in that accident. It was because of the explosion of torpedoes while they were being loaded into the submarine for a mission. Nobody has seen the final Board of Inquiry report into what happened. But what we do know is that some standard operating procedures and safety protocols were obviously overlooked. During that very, very careful and sensitive procedure. And we'll get into this a little bit more because it actually has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about in the Brahmaputra, which is that, the same boring protocols that you're trained to do in peacetime over and over again, sometimes crews and teams can start taking them for granted, saying, "Ye to pata hi hai."
Roz karte hain.
And, sometimes, and believe me, the Indian Navy is one of the most professional, one of the most, meticulous about detailed services I have ever seen. Believe me, and I'm not just saying this. But I think there have been occasions when, standard operating procedures, there have been slip-ups in them, plus maybe a little bit of complacency because you're an experienced crew. These things can happen. And like I keep repeating, you're handling deadly equipment. You're handling, a torpedo. A torpedo is a bomb, right?
Yep.
And therefore the smallest errors can lead to something like this. So the Sindhurakshak accident was was materially different from the other accidents because in the Sindhurakshak there was ordnance explosion which led to its sinking and finally its decommissioning. Many of the others were acts of incompetency, breakdowns in command, breakdowns in command and control, navigational errors, the lack of situational awareness which you're trained for when you're on a ship, someone dropping an anchor on a sonar dome, colliding with a fishing boat. All those things are unacceptable. I mean, there's no excuse for any of those things. It's easy for us to say them, but yeah, that particular year was truly a year that the Navy wanted to move past very, very fast.